Donald Trump strides into an upscale restaurant in downtown New York, his signature red Maga hat drawing all eyes toward him. The hum of conversations halts instantly. Some patrons stare in disbelief, others in disgust, while a few whisper amongst themselves. At the front counter, the young restaurant manager, James Thompson, late 20s, sharp suit, freezes, a deep frown forming on his face as he watches Trump approach. Trump, calm, but with a hint of amusement, asks for a table, but James, fueled by his strong personal convictions, coldly refuses. "We don't serve people who promote division here," James states flatly, loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. Trump raises an eyebrow, looking around as patrons begin to murmur. "I'm not here to debate your politics," Trump responds coolly. "I'm here for a meal." But James stands his ground, refusing to back down. "And I'm here to uphold the values of this establishment." The room shifts as people begin to take sides. Some are intrigued, others on edge. But what no one realizes yet is that Trump's presence here isn't by chance. He has a hidden agenda. The tension in the restaurant escalates rapidly. Several customers, emboldened by James's defiance, start to cheer him on. A man at a nearby table nods approvingly, while another whispers, "Good for him." But just as it seems like the entire room is against Trump, an unexpected voice rings out. Lydia Stevens, mid-30s, blonde hair, casual outfit, sitting near the back of the room, stands up, her voice shaking with emotion. "This isn't right." The room falls silent again. Lydia begins to speak, sharing a personal story of how her life changed under Trump's presidency. "I may not agree with everything, but his policies helped my family when we were struggling. This kind of public shaming, it's not the answer." A heartfelt confession shocks the room. Some patrons look uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. James, visibly irritated by Lydia's sudden defense of Trump, snaps back. "This isn't about helping anyone. It's about stopping hate." But Lydia, with a fire in her eyes, responds, "Is refusing to serve someone because of a hat really stopping hate? Or is it just creating more of it?" The verbal battleground intensifies as more patrons take sides, arguing loudly, while Trump watches with an unreadable expression. Just when it seems the restaurant might descend into chaos, an elderly man, Samuel Carter, late 70s, silver-haired, a regular customer, slowly rises from his corner table. Dressed in a modest tweed jacket and well-worn shoes, he is a man whose presence commands respect without a single word. As he moves, the lively discussions, the murmurs of discontent, and the tense air in the room begin to settle. All eyes turn to him. He's not just any patron. Samuel is a well-loved figure in the neighborhood, known for his wisdom and steady hand in difficult times. He moves deliberately, making his way to the counter where James stands, his face still contorted with frustration. The weight of Samuel's calm demeanor is enough to make James falter. He feels the eyes of the room on him, and suddenly his certainty begins to waver. Samuel places a hand on James's shoulder, a gesture both fatherly and firm. The room is silent now. Every breath is held, every pair of eyes focused on the old man. "James," Samuel begins, his voice deep but soft, like a grandfather offering sage advice, "let me tell you something you don't know." James frowns in confusion, still processing the sudden shift in energy. "Samuel, this isn't about you. It's about standing up to people like him," James mutters, his voice still tight with conviction, but now tinged with uncertainty. Samuel shakes his head slowly, a small, knowing smile on his face. "No, James. It's always about people like him," Samuel replies cryptically, leaving the young manager more perplexed. With a sigh, Samuel steps back slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Years ago," he begins, "I owned a small construction business. We were a humble operation, just me and a few others, scraping by. But, as the economy took a downturn, so did my business. I made mistakes, big ones. I blamed everyone around me, politicians, the market, even the people I loved. But in truth, I was too proud to ask for help. I let my pride drown me, and it nearly destroyed my life. A hush falls over the room. The crowd, now fully absorbed in Samuel's story, leans in closer. James, still standing rigid at the counter, listens, his mind racing. This isn't what he expected. My business was on the brink of collapse. I didn't know how to pay my workers. I didn't know how I'd make it another month. Samuel continues, his voice quivering with the weight of the memory. I was ready to close up shop. My wife was ill, and the stress was killing me. Then, one day, out of the blue, I received a letter. It was from a lawyer. Inside was a check. A sizable amount, enough to cover my debts and then some. Samuel pauses, glancing around the room. The patrons are hanging on his every word, their eyes wide with disbelief. James squints, struggling to piece together where this story is going. Who? He begins, but Samuel raises a hand, signaling for patience. The donor? Samuel's voice drops to a near whisper. It was Donald Trump. Gasps ripple through the crowd like a wave. A few people exchange stunned glances, while others look skeptically at Samuel, waiting for him to reveal a punchline that never comes. James feels the blood drain from his face. His grip on the counter tightens as his world shifts around him. He can't believe what he's hearing. Samuel smiles wistfully. I didn't ask for his help. He didn't know me, and I didn't know him. But for some reason, out of nowhere, he decided to help a struggling small business owner. Someone who was a nobody to him. He never asked for recognition, never made it public. He didn't even meet me in person. I tried to send a thank you letter, but it never reached him. He wasn't doing it for praise. He was doing it because maybe sometimes we all need a hand, whether we admit it or not. The room is deathly still. Even the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of kitchen appliances seem to have faded into the background. James swallows hard, his chest tightening. But why? He stammers, his voice barely audible. His mind spins with contradictions. This man, the one he had just refused service to, had quietly saved the livelihood of someone he respected more than anyone. Samuel looks at James with a tenderness that's both fatherly and knowing. Why does it matter? He asks softly. Sometimes we judge people without knowing the full story. I was one of those people. I judged Trump from afar, based on what I heard, what I thought I knew, but that day, he showed me a different side. He showed me that there's more to a person than their politics, their public persona. He showed me kindness when I had nothing left. James stands, frozen, the weight of Samuel's words crashing over him. Everything he thought he knew about Trump, every conviction he held about his own righteousness, suddenly feels shaky. He glances over at Trump, who remains seated calmly at his table, not saying a word. Then, for the first time since the confrontation began, Trump rises from his chair. He walks toward the counter, his gait measured, his expression unreadable. The room is tense, waiting to see what happens next. I didn't come here for a free meal, Trump says quietly, his voice breaking the silence like a sharp crack in the air. I came because I heard this place was known for its community and unity. His words hang in the air like a bombshell. The patrons, once divided, now exchange confused, guilty glances. James, still reeling from Samuel's revelation, stares at Trump, his mind struggling to catch up. I'm not here to cause division, Trump continues, his gaze sweeping over the room. I didn't come to make a statement. I came to support this restaurant because I believe in what it stands for. The realization hits James like a thunderbolt. Trump wasn't there to make a spectacle or cause trouble. He had come to support the very values James thought he was defending. The entire crowd, which had been so quick to pick sides, now stands in stunned silence, grappling with the unexpected turn of events. James, his face pale and his voice trembling, looks around the room at the patrons, who are all now staring at him, waiting for his response. He feels the weight of their judgment, the weight of his own misjudgment. He's spent years building an identity around his beliefs, and now, in the span of a few moments, that identity is crumbling. His identity is crumbling. The weight of Samuel's words begins to sink in, pressing heavily on James's chest. His mind races as everything he thought he knew, everything that had seemed so clear just moments ago, now feels hazy and uncertain. He can sense the room's collective gaze on him, waiting, expecting something. But instead of surrendering immediately to the realization that perhaps he had misjudged, James feels his pride digging in, one last defense against the inevitable reckoning. His voice, now shaky and unsure, breaks the tense silence. I still don't agree with your politics. The words come out like a lifeline, as though clinging to this one last piece of certainty might somehow save him from the crumbling reality around him. The statement is feeble, almost pleading, and even James can feel how hollow it sounds as it leaves his lips. Trump, who has remained calm and composed throughout the entire ordeal, lets a small smile tug at the corners of his mouth. He tips his hat slightly, a gesture both respectful and understanding. His response is simple but profound. "You don't have to," Trump says, his voice steady and calm. "That's the beauty of this country." The tension in the air begins to ease. Some of the customers who had stood stiffly moments ago now seem to relax, and the once fractured room feels like it might finally find common ground. But just as things seem to deflate, Lydia steps forward again, her face flushed and her eyes brimming with tears. "I was like you, James," she confesses, her voice trembling as the weight of her emotions pushes through. "I used to hate Trump too. I thought he represented everything I despised, everything that was wrong with the world." Her voice falters for a moment, and she quickly wipes away a tear with the back of her hand. The room is once again silent, captivated by this new revelation. James turns his head slightly toward Lydia, his expression softening. He wasn't expecting this, least of all from her. Lydia continues, her voice now more urgent, as though she's trying to reach not just James, but everyone in the room. "It wasn't until my father died," she says, her voice breaking, "and I had to help my mother keep the house, that I realized. It wasn't about the hat. It wasn't about the slogans. It was about survival. Trump's policies, they saved my mother from losing everything. I don't agree with all of his politics either, but in that moment, it wasn't about politics. It was about someone actually helping." The room is thick with emotion. Lydia's raw honesty cuts through the last remnants of tension, her words hanging in the air like a weight that no one can ignore. Even James, who had been so certain, so resolute in his disdain, feels the last of his disdain crumbling. He looks at Lydia, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and guilt, trying to process what she's just shared. Undecided, Lydia laughed a little. The truth, delivered so personally, breaks through his final barrier. He had believed his stance was about principles, about standing up for what he thought was right. But now, in the face of Lydia's story, in the face of Samuel's revelation, he's beginning to realize that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. Maybe his judgment had been too quick, too harsh. The crowd, once vocal in their support of James, now stands quietly, their expressions conflicted. Many of them had been on James's side, cheering him on, but now there's an undeniable shift in the room. They watch closely, some shifting uncomfortably, as the weight of Lydia's words settles in. James lowers his head, his pride finally giving way to reflection. His mind races back to the moment Trump first walked in, how he had judged him immediately, how he had let his preconceived notions dictate his actions without stopping to consider the person behind the politics. Maybe I was wrong. The thought hits him like a punch to the gut. It's a truth that's hard to accept, especially after making such a public stand. He knows everyone is watching him, waiting for what he'll say next. His voice, barely a whisper, is heavy with regret as he finally speaks. Maybe I was wrong. The words are soft, but the room hears them clearly. It's an admission that seems to hang in the air, carrying with it the weight of everything that's happened. James doesn't look up. He can't. His shoulders slump slightly, as if the burden of his realization is too much to bear all at once. The silence that follows is thick with anticipation. The customers who were once so eager to back James now stand still, some exchanging glances of uncertainty, others nodding in quiet understanding. It's clear that the evening has taken an unexpected turn, one that no one had anticipated. What began as a confrontation has turned into something much deeper, a moment of reflection for everyone in the room. Trump, still standing near the counter, regards James with a look of understanding. He doesn't push further, doesn't gloat or seek validation. Instead, he simply nods, as if acknowledging the difficult journey James has just undertaken. "It's not about agreeing on everything," Trump says gently. "It's about listening, about understanding that we all come from different places." Lydia wipes the last of her tears away, her expression one of relief. She steps closer to James, placing a hand on his arm. "It's okay to be wrong sometimes," she says softly. "What matters is that you're willing to see things differently." James finally looks up, meeting her gaze. For the first time that night, he feels the tension in his chest begin to ease. He takes a deep breath, the weight of the moment sinking in fully. The crowd watches, still holding their breath, as if waiting for a final resolution. "I just wanted to protect what I thought was right," James murmurs, his voice barely audible but laced with sincerity. Lydia nods. "We all do," she says, her voice warm and understanding. "But sometimes, what's right isn't always what we expect." The room seems to exhale collectively, the tension slowly dissipating as James's admission settles in. The atmosphere shifts from one of conflict to one of reflection, and it's clear that something significant has changed, not just for James, but for everyone who witnessed the night's events. Before anyone can react, Trump speaks once more, his voice calm and steady. "You're not wrong for standing up for what you believe," he says, locking eyes with James. "But next time, try listening first." Trump tips his hat and begins walking toward the door. The restaurant is dead silent as he reaches for the handle, but James, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment, suddenly calls out, "Wait!" The room holds its breath as James steps forward, his voice shaky but sincere. I'm sorry," he stammers, struggling to find the right words. "I misjudged you. Please, let me offer you a meal. On the house." Trump turns back, his expression softening. "I appreciate the gesture," he replies, "but I have other plans." He pauses, looking James in the eye, and adds, "Remember this. Change doesn't start by shutting people out." With those parting words, Trump walks out into the night, leaving behind a restaurant full of people lost in their own thoughts. The tension has vanished, replaced by a quiet sense of reflection. James stands frozen, replaying the entire encounter in his mind. Before he can fully process it, Samuel, the elderly man, speaks again, his voice calm but firm. "James," he says, "Trump's not the only one you owe an apology to. You owe it to yourself to be better." The words hit hard, and James realizes the truth in them. The patrons murmur in agreement, some offering soft nods as they gather their things and leave. The once divided crowd now seems united in a shared sense of contemplation. James lingers by the door, staring out into the street where Trump disappeared. The pride and anger he felt earlier are now gone, replaced by a humbling realization. He's no longer the man he was when the night began, and as he watches the empty street, He knows that this moment has changed him in ways he's only just beginning to understand. As the story of this remarkable evening unfolds, we're left with a powerful reminder. It's not just about standing up for what we believe, but learning to listen, to understand, and to grow. If you found this story as moving and thought-provoking as we did, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Join us for more stories that challenge perspectives, inspire change, and remind us of the human connections that bind us all. Don't miss out on the next journey. Let's continue to grow together.